Welcome to today's 5-minute mini lesson in our new Finance 101 series covering the fundamentals of anything you need to know in personal finance and investing. Today's video answers the question, what is a recession? We'll also discuss why some pundits think you could see a recession either this year or 2023. And if you stick around towards the end, I'll share with you one metric that most professional investors are keeping an eye on that could foreshadow a recession. So please stay tuned. Hey guys, welcome back. It's Phil from Build My ROI, where we empower you with the mindset and financial skills that you need to build and grow your wealth. If you're new here, make sure you click that subscribe button below and like and share this video if you find value in our content. Let's dive in. So, what is a recession? Just as an economy can grow or expand during boom times, it can also contract or experience negative growth. Economic conditions such as the labor market, interest rates, and generally what economists refer to as demand side or supply side shocks can all trigger economic contractions. This is a natural part of the economic cycle, which inherently has boom and bust cycles. And technically, the National Bureau of Economic Research, also called the NBER, is who determines when a recession has started and when it's ended. In fact, the old or historical definition of a recession was when an economy had 2 consecutive quarters of contraction, where the GDP growth was negative. Now, the NBER defines a recession as a significant decline in economic activity spread across the economy, lasting more than a few months, normally visible in real GDP, real income, employment, industrial production, and wholesale retail sales. That's a mouthful. This change in definition is important, and for example, is why we defined the 2020 historical contraction as a recession. This was actually at the very beginning of the pandemic in March 2020, although this was the shortest recession we've had on record. So speaking of historical recessions, how many have we had? Historically, the US has had many recessions. In the 20th century alone, we had 12 recessions, and so far in the 21st century, we've experienced 3 recessions. These are the 2001 recession, which lasted 8 months, the 2008 and 2009 recession, which lasted 19 months from December 2007 to June 2009, and the 2020 recession, which lasted only a couple of months, but had the largest economic contraction, like I mentioned earlier, of about negative 31.2%. So the next question is, what are typical effects of recessions? Generally, a recession is an uncertain time for individuals and companies. Because of the economic slowdown, you will typically see an increase in unemployment and layoffs as companies look to cut labor costs. You'll see a slowdown in top line and profit growth in companies. You'll also see companies going into distress due to high borrowing costs or being unable to meet their debt obligations. For individuals, you'll also see high levels of financial hardship, unfortunately, and also a reduction in consumer spending, amongst many other effects. So it's generally a very difficult time. So are we in a recession? The short answer is no. Could we be in one in 2022 or 2023? Well, that all depends on how the Federal Reserve manages the economic conditions that we are in. Let me explain. The Federal Reserve sets what is called monetary policy, which is a set of actions it takes to manage sustainable economic growth and economic health. The Fed accomplishes this by what's called dual mandate, which are 2 goals. First, price stability and maximum sustainable employment. Basically, in plain English, this means the Fed's mission is to ensure both inflation and unemployment remain checked. So both of these 2 objectives. Now, how does it do this? It has traditionally conducted monetary policy by using 3 tools. First, reserve requirements. Secondly, the discount rate, or the Fed funds rate as more commonly known, and what are also called open market operations. These tools help it manage the money supply and thus the broader economic conditions. So for example, to stimulate growth, the Fed could lower the discount rate or relax reserve requirements to increase money supply, thus creating the conditions that will spur growth. The reverse is also true. To slow growth, the Fed could raise the discount rate or cut back on open market operations. In fact, this is exactly what it announced this past week that it was going to do recently when inflation hit 8.3%. The actions that the Fed takes to slow down an overheated economy or to tighten economic conditions have a lag of somewhere between 6 to 9 months. And this is one reason the Fed can actually inadvertently trigger a recession. Think of this as the Fed hitting the brakes on the economy with the risk of stepping on the brake pedal too hard or too long, since the effect is not something that you will see immediately. The current environment is especially tricky because of a couple of other things that are at play in the globe today. The first is the Russian-Ukraine war and its continued effects on commodity prices like oil, natural gas, and obviously what we've been seeing in increases in prices, generally speaking, and the price level in the economy. So the uncertainty of this one aspect is very, very important and actually an unknown and could affect things negatively. Secondly, the supply chain issues that have persisted in the global and US economies since the beginning of COVID. These are still persisting, in fact, affecting companies even as we speak here in May 2022. Who would have known? So this is a second and very important aspect of the puzzle, basically, or rather the maze, I should say, that the Fed is trying to navigate. And third, COVID in China, surprisingly, and the subsequent COVID lockdowns that are still in place and will continue to worsen the existing supply chain problems that we've just spoken about. Now, how does a recession affect stocks? First, let's be clear, the economy is not the stock market. It's easy to conflate the two. But the way to think about this is the stock market is a leading indicator of the economy. Does this mean that if the stock market correction continues, that the economy will also suffer a huge correction and a recession for that matter? Not necessarily. The stock market and indices really capture investors' views of anticipated public company future performance and cash flow expectations. That's what stock prices are and what you see when you look at, the S&P level or the Dow Jones and so on. The economy, on the other hand, as measured by GDP, is the output of goods and services. So we can have a rise in the stock market even in a bad economy. And we saw this very well in the beginning of 2020 during the beginning of the pandemic. So having said this, stocks and the stock market tend to be volatile for the most part. And especially during economic contractions or recessions, you'll see them experience declines, obviously, and sometimes significant declines for that matter. Now, for the bonus tip, a key metric that most investors watch closely is the 10-year Treasury yield. This is the market's consensus view of where rates are headed. The way to understand this is that generally each percentage move up in the 10-year typically results in a meaningful decline in the S&P. So keep a close eye on this to gauge when and how much to get more exposure to or less exposure to equities. As a reference point, as of the recording of this video, the 10-year is at 2.9%, having risen from 1.75% at the beginning of 2022. So keep an eye on that, because that's really going to tell us how much the Fed really has to move in terms of raising rates and how many hikes that the Fed needs to put in place to really bring inflation under control, and whether or not it can actually do that in what they call a soft landing, in a way that doesn't really trigger a recession, obviously inadvertently. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is today's Finance 101 series on recessions. Please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this content or learned something from it. I'm working on more videos and more content, so do leave a comment if there's any particular topic in investing, personal finance that you would like me to cover. Thanks for watching, and until next time, peace and love.